You're good.
So if you were watching what Emily was just presenting on TV, she had a triangle diagram if you were here in time. And if you weren't, that's fine, because we're going to go over it. But one of the things that we like to talk about, let me use the black one just so you can see it better. Our approach to health and really our pursuit of wellness here. So we like to help people feel better than they are now, but also the ultimate goal is to get you feeling as good as you could feel. That's really the purpose of what we do around here. So you have to start somewhere. Most people come into our office with some sort of symptom. And the symptom can be anything. It can be something related to mood, like depression, anxiety, insomnia, PMS, which is kind of in that same category, even though your mood's not bad all month, just part of the month. So all of those are symptoms. Pain is a symptom, allergies are a symptom, hangnails are a symptom, you name it. Anything that you don't want to have anymore, that you'd like to get rid of. So most people come to us with a symptom or two, sometimes 12, that's okay. We don't scare easily. So when you have a symptom, if you go to a conventional doctor, or let's say it's an acute symptom and you even go to urgent care or something like that, usually there's some sort of testing that's done. So they do, either they look at you and do an exam, or they'll do some blood work, or they might do an MRI, or you might pee in a cup, right? These are all things that you might do if you had some sort of health concern. And then usually they'll say, okay, you have blah. They give you a name, like a label, right? So you have hangnail syndrome. No, you have a bad knee, you have osteoarthritis in your knee, or you have depression. That's actually a diagnosis that you get, right? It has a code that goes along with it. They have this really giant book, or if they're smart, they have an online system, right, software, and they look up the diagnosis that they want to give you, and it has a code that goes along with it. Super complicated, and the coding system is so they can bill your insurance. And then the other thing that it does is it tells them which medication or which treatment is acceptable. So this is how the medical world typically works, right? Have you experienced that, roughly? All right. So the goal is to stay out of that system as much as possible, if you can, because I don't find labels to be very helpful in the long run, because it doesn't really tell you what's going on or why you have that problem. It just sort of gives you a name, and then you sort of walk around, kind of put it in your purse and walk around with it like, yeah, I got this in my purse right here. I got this label they gave me, and it sort of follows you around, and then you're always trying to figure out, like, well, why do I have this? How do I get rid of it? What do I do about it? So a lot of times if you go to the medical doctor, they give you some sort of drug, maybe some sort of treatment, right, or surgery or something like that. There's usually some sort of recommendation. It's pretty rare that you go in and then you get a label and you don't get something in return, right? Even if I have people that go in the winter and they have the flu and they actually get a medication, they'll give them an antibiotic. But the flu's a virus and antibiotics are for bacteria, but honestly, it's because when you arrive at the urgent care or you arrive there, you're expecting something in return, and if you don't leave with something, you're a little miffed, right? And the doctors, they're just trying to figure out, okay, well, if I give them this, then hopefully they'll feel a little bit better. But it's not really a solution, and it's certainly not a long-term solution, right? I mean, the flu is temporary, so maybe bad example, but you get my drift. So when we talk about things like depression, anxiety, those types of things, medication is really meant to be a short-term solution in acute situations. So if somebody is really, really manic, or really, really in a bad place, like suicidal, or really, really having a hard time, the medication that is for those conditions really was designed and meant to be for those temporary, severe situations. But then what's happened, especially in our society in the U.S., is those medications are handed out as a solution, sometimes a long-term solution, years, decades even, to try to solve those problems. Whereas what we do around here is we try to figure out, well, why is that happening in the first place? Right? So instead of covering up the symptom, or kind of, putting a little duct tape over your check engine light so you don't have to look at it, it's less stressful that way. You just kind of cover it up. It's not that that's not valid, but it's not valid long-term. Long-term, we want to figure, okay, how do we fix it? How do we make it better? What can we do that we can have some control over the situation? Which I tend to think is a better way of approaching things. So we know that symptoms come about when there's an imbalance in the body. And it doesn't matter what the symptom is. It can be, like I said, a hangnail, or something really severe like anxiety, or anything in between. Those symptoms come about because there's an imbalance. So when your organs are malfunctioning or dysfunctioning, not working the way they're supposed to, because they're missing something that they need in order to do their job, you get a symptom. So I'll give you a for instance. So we're just going to write deficiency. I'll just write deficient because I ran out of room. All right. So if you're deficient in something that you need for an organ to do its job, then you get a symptom. So, and for example, if you're missing B vitamins in your diet, B vitamins are important for your brain to do its job. So without B vitamins, you can feel anxious, brain fog, tired in the afternoon around 2 to 3 p.m. You want to take a nap. Or maybe feel a little grumpy, or maybe you kind of go up and down and through the day your energy is not very stable. Those are some examples of a B vitamin deficiency. And that can be severe over a period of time. If you're lacking B vitamins for a long time, that can develop into extreme anxiety, depression, trouble focusing to the point where you get a diagnosis, right? ADD, ADHD, something like that. You follow how that could be? Okay, so in the short term, so people come into my office all the time and they say, I just have brain fog, I can't think of words. I'm like trying to, what's that? They're like trying to think of a word. So that's the beginnings of a problem, of a deficiency, but that can go either quickly or slowly in the direction of more and more severe to the point where, you might be looking for a solution. It gets bad enough, you need a medication. So that would be like dementia, right? So that's obviously a long time down the road. But when we start to have these lapses in our memory, if you don't do something about it long term, it might be 2-3 decades later, but eventually you start to lose that function more. So if you feel a little bit nervous or a little bit anxious or a little stressed, and I'll tell you that the number one thing, right after fatigue, because fatigue is the number one symptom people come in with, not enough energy. The very next thing is stress in some way, shape, or form. So whether they feel anxious, whether they can't sleep at night, whether they feel tired, as the day goes on, or whether they're just sort of like overwhelmed. Stress is definitely on the top 3 things that people talk to me about. Because our world is very stressful. It just is. The way that our society functions today, it's much too fast. We have much too many things to do. And everything's like, and then you add in computers and social media and Pinterest, right? Moms, like everybody knows it's like, gotta have the perfect birthday party and the perfect house and right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Nobody can really achieve it. So this leads to like this anxiety and this sort of hamster wheel, if you will, where we're constantly trying to keep up. We don't get enough downtime, don't usually get enough sleep, and certainly not enough time to just sit and read a nice book and, or meditate or whatever you like to do to unwind. So all of those situations, that fast-paced life, and computers contribute to that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the fast-paced life, and this is our kids, right? This is our moms, this is our dads, and I won't leave dads out of the equation. They're under stress too. So when that's happening, you're using up nutrients. So it takes a lot of nutrients, a lot of food, which is fuel, and a lot of nutrient-dense food in order to keep your body working. So you think of it like a machine. If you expect your car to go 120 miles an hour, you're going to have to put some serious work into that car. You're going to have to make sure all the lubrication's right and all the parts. You're going to have to make sure the gas you put in there is like the very top stuff you can buy, right? You're going to have to get it a tune-up every couple 100 miles because it's not going to go at that pace for very long without breaking down unless you're really maintaining it. Well, the same thing is true for your body. So we can't expect that out of our bodies, that crazy pace that we're trying to keep, unless we're really fueling it. So that's where proper diet comes in, and that's what we're going to talk about specifically. So you become deficient if you're not putting in specific things that you need. So around here, we do that with dietary change, and we do it with supplementation, because what we're trying to do is get there faster. If you change your diet to a very perfect nutrient-dense diet right now, threw out all the sugar, no packaged foods, made everything from scratch from an organic garden, it would still take a period of time, months at least, to really start to feel like, okay, now I'm really getting some good progress. I'm pulling out of this. if we do some improvement on your diet and at the same time we add in some whole food nutrition or some high quality herbs, it speeds up the progress. So we can create those, we can correct those deficiencies faster. So that's why a lot of people that come in and start on a program actually feel results quickly, usually within oftentimes a couple of weeks. It certainly depends on the individual, certainly depends on the situation and their health concerns, but it's not uncommon for somebody to come in, start a program, and within a couple of weeks say, wow, my energy's better. Wow, I really do feel less anxious. I am sleeping better. Those are all things that we expect around here, and that's not medication, that's doing supplementation and some dietary change. So the dietary change is very important. The supplementation just speeds things up. But long-term results come from the dietary change. So when we're trying to correct deficiencies, when we do this and we start to do it quickly, the organs will start to function the way they're supposed to again, or the parts of the engine, the parts of the car, and then the symptoms will dissipate. So the fatigue lifts, the brain fog lifts, you start to sleep better, you start to feel like, okay, you know, some of my improvement is being seen. So that's what we do around here. We identify which of these areas needs to be addressed, and specifically for each individual person. So everything we do here is individualized because everybody is different, right? So even if 10 people come in with that same diagnosis code stuck to them, they all need something different. So somebody might need B vitamins, somebody might need fish oil, good fats for their brain, somebody else might need some minerals, or a combination of those. Make sense? Okay, good. So what we're trying to do is not cover up the symptoms. That's okay to do short term, but we really want to correct the underlying deficiencies. Now, to truly correct the deficiency, it can take, it's a minimum of 3 months. It can take 6 months, 9 months, a year. And I actually have people that I take care of that I've been seeing for a decade. And the reason for that is because if you lead a really fast-paced lifestyle, you can correct a lot of deficiencies, but along the way, sometimes you need a little extra help because you might develop a couple smaller ones as time goes on. But in general, the people that I've been seeing the longest, they don't get frequent illnesses, right? They don't get the colds and the flus that everybody else gets. They don't have the seasonal allergies anymore. You know, they sleep well. If they get depleted, they can recover. They don't get sick for weeks and weeks and weeks. So these are the types of things that we're trying to accomplish long term. Sounds great, right? All right. So when we talk about depression and anxiety, which I'm kind of throwing that at the top of the list, but anything to do with mood. So like I said, you know, PMS or ADD, so that would be like moral focus, and even memory. So when we talk about brain, we talk about memory or brain fog. Those are all symptoms. So yes, they can have a diagnosis code. Oftentimes they're medicated, but the truth is that underlying it is the same issue. And that's what we're trying to decode. So when it comes to those types of things, the number one thing that we usually pick on around here is sugar, right? All right, so sugar actually causes nutritional deficiencies. It's an anti-nutrient. And so what that means is when you eat sugar, your body has to use up other nutrients like minerals. Magnesium is a typical one. Your body has to use a ton of magnesium to neutralize or to detoxify, essentially, from even a little bit of sugar. So when you have a magnesium deficiency, you feel, sometimes you get leg cramps, you certainly can feel tired, lots of trouble sleeping, constipated, don't recover well from exercise. So if you're eating sugar, that can be actually creating that magnesium deficiency. So certainly you want to maybe take some supplemental magnesium, but at the same time, of course, it makes sense to reduce the sugar intake. That's going to balance it out. So that's one example. It can deplete all minerals, and it definitely depletes B vitamins, which I already mentioned to you, a lot of the symptoms that can come along with B vitamin deficiency. So who craves sugar? Anybody? Most of you? Okay, thank you. To be honest, I've been there, done that. Right? I am an official recovered sugarholic. I'm actually a carbaholic. Bagels were my sugar of choice, but same difference because it's a high starch food, right? So bagels, breads, pastas, all those things in quantity turn into sugar and have a similar effect. So I'll let you in on a little hint. Everybody craves sugar. whether it's a cupcake or pasta, it doesn't really matter. All of us have that because it's very addictive. And it does have this little effect on the brain where in the short term, even if it's only for a few moments, it does make you happy. It actually releases certain chemicals in the brain that make you happy. That's why you like it. That's why you want more of it. That's why you think about it and scheme on how you're going to get more. That's a thing, okay? But it's an addictive substance, just like a drug. So just like someone's addicted to cocaine or heroin, we are addicted to sugar, and it has a similar effect on the body, has a similar effect on the brain. They've done studies on rats where they, get a animal. We're not rats, but you understand. That's how they do it, right? So they get this animal addicted to cocaine, and then they give it the option of cocaine or sugar. It'll actually pick sugar because it actually has a more immediate effect. I mean, it's crazy. I'm talking like sugar is. It's really, really bad. It's honestly, if it went away tomorrow, I'd have to find a new job because everybody would be fine. No, I'm exaggerating, but I would have to maybe do something else on the side. I wouldn't be busy enough because I wouldn't have enough people to take care of because everybody would be doing so much better without it because it really is that detrimental to our health. It's also big money and big bucks for the people that get you addicted to sugar, that sell you sugar, right? So that's why it's everywhere. Have you noticed this? If you ever try to give up sugar, it's not technically everywhere, but it's almost everywhere. So it's not in a steak, and it's not in broccoli. And that's pretty much it. It's everywhere now. Every other food, and we're not talking about a real piece of fruit, like a whole piece of fruit. Yes, that has sugar in it, but that's much less of a problem than the ice cream, the cookies, the drinks. We have a little board around here which you can look at later, but some of the juices, fruit juice is terrible. It's just as bad as pop as far as the sugar content. So a lot of moms feed their kids juice instead of pop because it's, it seems like a healthier alternative, but it is just loaded with sugar. What that sugar does, well, we already mentioned, right? It depletes B vitamins, it depletes minerals, and those two substances alone, those two nutrients alone, keep you feeling calm and focused and energetic and even keeled. So if you're lacking B vitamins and you're lacking good minerals, then you will absolutely feel anxious and tired and moody and depressed. Because sometimes the depression part is fatigue, right? I mean, it's like when you feel really, really tired, you don't necessarily feel very chipper, right? So a lot of times your body's just so tired that it looks like depression. And I actually have a lot of women, unfortunately, that come to me and they say, look, I went to my medical doctor, I told him how tired I am, and they wanted to give me an antidepressant. Because they said, well, if you're that tired and your blood work's normal, then you must be depressed. And they said, but I'm not. I have a really great life. I just can't keep up with it, right? So living on caffeine to try to compensate for the lack of energy, and then you get into this loop where you're having so much caffeine that you're now kind of going up and down in your energy. And usually there's something added to the caffeine, a little sugar, right? So sugar really is the thing that you want to focus on in order to improve your health, because it will keep you from becoming more deficient in the vitamins, nutrients that you need, but it also gets us on this roller coaster of energy. So little kids, when they eat sugar, they feel really hyper. You see this, right? Kids know this because they'll tell why are you so hyper? I ate a bunch of sugar. Absolutely. They 100% know that that's true. But then what happens is they go up and then they go, they crash, right? And when they crash, they get grumpy, right? They throw tantrums. Maybe they get sleepy, but most kids, they show it in their mood. As adults, we don't recognize that as much because what happens as adults is we might get a tiny bit of energy right after we eat the sugar, but quickly we drop down and we feel tired. So people report this to me routinely once they really start looking at their diet and working on it, because I have people actually write down their diet. Once they start looking at it and watching it, they say, oh my gosh, it's definitely, I ate this and then within an hour I wanted to take a nap. So if you'll start to connect the dots, and you usually can see that connection more easily if you're having less sweets overall or less carbohydrates overall. So it's not always obvious right at the beginning, but as you start to reduce the overall amount, you'll start to see that connection. Like, oh gosh, why was I so tired today? Oh yeah, I had that donut at 11, because what happens, the coworkers bring it in and they leave it right on your desk. Or whoever's in your environment that brings you sugar. So sugar puts you on a roller coaster, and what happens then from a mood standpoint is that you go up, and sometimes you actually feel anxious from sugar. That happens a lot, jittery or anxious, especially a lot of caffeine or a lot of sugar at the same time. You go up and then you fall down. So then mood's down here, and you get on this roller coaster, and that will also continue into the night. So you'll see people who are having trouble sleeping, or you go to sleep pretty easily, but then at 3 a.m. you're awake. Oftentimes that's a sugar roller coaster. So even though you haven't eaten in several hours, your body's still doing that. So you'll see it with kids really obviously, but then as adults it's a little more subtle. But if you watch for it, you'll see that as a pattern. So the goal is to keep your blood sugar, the sugar that's in your blood, a little more even. So obviously we know about sweets, we know about, candy, cookies, stuff like that. We all know it's bad, right? But when you're addicted to it, it's harder to say no. And then you've also got, in addition to this, the other sugars. So that's going to be, like I mentioned, breads, pastas, bagels, the really like heavy foods, starchy foods, even potatoes for some people, especially if it's like French fries or potato chips, which is sometimes people's favorite thing. So I'm going to write sugar / carbs, okay? So when you're having a lot of this at once, you have more of a tendency to go up and then crash down. So that will involve not only your energy but your mood. So what we want to do is try to have smaller amounts of this when you do have it. So it's not that you can have zero, but you want to have smaller amounts at one time. And you want to balance it with good fats and good proteins. So I mentioned fish oil earlier. We use a lot of fish oil in our office because it's one of the things that makes brains work better. So not just for memory or focus, but it absolutely helps with mood. So there's some fish oil that's stimulating. So if you have a lower mood, it can lift you up. And then there's some fish oil that's calming. So if someone has trouble with attention, like kids have trouble sitting still at school, we'll put them on a calming fish oil. So there's different parts of the fat that are good. So in general, from a dietary standpoint, you want to eat a variety of good fats and plenty of it. So you don't want to limit your fat intake. It doesn't matter about the calories. You won't get heavy. Everybody's talking about keto, right? Keto diet, you hear about that. Same idea. I'm not saying keto, but I am saying more fat and less carbohydrates, which is going in that direction, okay? So when you talk about fats, you talk about things like butter. Butter's good. Coconut oil. And then fish oil is good, or fish. Actually, eating fish is okay. Now, the quality of food matters, of course, but in general, we're looking at these as good, healthy fats. Olive oil, avocado oil, or avocados, nuts and seeds. Those are all good quality fats. And the fat that's found in high quality proteins. So proteins would include things like eggs, steak, right? So meat, chicken is fine. So when you're choosing proteins, you want to choose proteins that have more fat attached to them. So you want to eat the whole egg, not just the white. The yolk is where it's at. That's where all the nutrition is, and that's where all the good fat is as well. When you're having chicken, if you like dark meat, choose dark meat. And if it's high quality, keep the skin on it, because then you get more fat that way. So that's where the most of the nutrition is, in those proteins. And there's a lot of vitamins that we can only get if you're eating them along with fat. They're called fat-soluble vitamins. It's an interesting idea, right? So vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. Vitamin D, very, very important for mood. So in February in Michigan, when the sun hasn't shone in many months, and you can't go outside because it's 20 below every day for 3 weeks in a row, how do you feel? I feel terrible.
Crabby.
It's so crabby. I get a little angry, a little resentful. Start looking online for vacation rentals or maybe new houses down south, and start to question your sanity and why you live here in the first place. But one of the reasons that we feel that way is because our vitamin D levels, if you're not supplementing a good quality vitamin D, your vitamin D level goes right through the floor, because one of the ways we get vitamin D is from the sun. So in the summertime, not only is it warmer and more pleasurable, but you are getting more vitamin D if you're getting some sun exposure in the middle of the day. And that does impact our mental health, and it makes us feel happier. So supplementing with a good quality vitamin D is good, but also eating foods that are high in vitamin D or that are high in good fats is important. So that's your fish, that's your butter. Cod liver oil. Did anybody come from an era where you had to drink cod liver oil? Well, we're back, because I do it all the time. My daughter gets cod liver oil every day through a little syringe. She loves it. She's 8 months old. She's like, yeah, give me the cod liver. You know, she's so excited about it. I mean, it does not smell good. I would not like it, but she loves it. She doesn't know any different because she's been getting it for her whole life, but it's very important for brain development in children and immune system health. So she gets it because it's good for her, and we don't eat many cod livers. So we supplement with the cod liver oil. So that's the idea. We're trying to supplement our diet with things that we don't normally eat a lot. It used to be that everybody ate liver on a pretty regular basis. We used to eat the entire animal. We'd eat the heart, we'd eat the brain even. So that's not something we do on a regular basis anymore. It still exists. It's still something that some of us aspire to. But a lot of the supplements that we use in the office are actually made from cow liver, are made from brain, are made from spleen, things that we normally would have consumed, but we don't anymore. And I can't get people to eat it, so I just have it in supplement form. But the reason why it's important to eat organs is because that's where all the nutrients are stored. So when you have an animal that's eating grass and eating, taking nutrients from the sun, from the grass, breaking it down, it's actually storing those nutrients in its organs. So if we don't eat the organs, then at least we get them through the supplements. So the B vitamins that I use are made from liver and heart and kidney, things like that, because that's where the B vitamins come from. So you can eat liver if you like it. It's not so bad. But you can't cover it in ketchup like you used to when you were a kid, and that's like full of sugar, so I don't know, we're sunk. Just use plain tomato sauce. No. So increasing the fat in your diet, and with protein, because you'll be eating protein anyway to get some of that fat, because that's where you're going to do your eggs, your meat, chicken, fish. So by doing these two things, you will be more easily able to limit your sugar and carbohydrates, because you'll feel fuller, longer, more satisfied, and your energy will start to stabilize. So when you crave sugar, usually it's when you're tired, or when you haven't eaten in a while, and your blood sugar starts to go, right, and then you get hangry. None of you probably, but it happens to some people. Occasionally, I've heard rumor of this. So when you start to get hangry, the solution to that is not sugar. And actually, it's a condition. People say, I have hypoglycemia, which means their blood sugar goes low. The solution to that is not to eat sugar. The solution to that is to eat more fat and more protein on a more regular basis throughout the day. And this is something that really, especially in our culture as children, like the kids in our country do not eat enough fat and they do not eat enough protein. Because most of the kid-friendly foods, what are they? They're sugar. Yeah, they're carbohydrates. Absolutely. Unfortunately. So they don't, usually like to eat eggs in the morning, right? They're interested in Pop-Tarts or cereal or bagels. Even if you're eating a higher quality, like a whole grain type thing, that's still going to be mostly sugar. So the goal is to try to get more protein, more fat into the diet. If you have kids, do it early. But if you're just you and working where you're at now, you can still turn things around and feel better. But I'm interested in changing like the actual nutrition in kids, because even I don't know. This is always interesting to me, and we talk about it sometimes. Do you remember taking, or if you're a teacher, do you remember taking the standardized tests at school? Yeah, I remember. It used to be that we did it, I think, 2 days of the year. Now it's much more frequent, right? I think they do it much more frequently. But on standardized tests week, we would get this letter. They would send home a letter to our parents, and it said, "Please be sure your kids eat protein for breakfast." Anybody remember getting that letter? How come it's only that week? And why would they say that? Because if you eat protein for breakfast, your brain works better, you have better energy, you stay awake all day. It was like, Yeah, that's a great advice. But it should probably be the first day of school year. Hey, for this school year, please make sure your kids eat protein for breakfast every day. And please don't feed them ice cream every night. And please don't send them with candy in their lunchbox, right? So, I don't know. I don't get that. These are the questions that I ask. I don't know. Someday I'll get answers, but I think it's interesting. You know, it's sort of like too much to aspire to this idea that we would have protein every day. So let's just do it this week. It's a good start. It's better than nothing. But the reason that that's sent out is because the administrators know too, hey, if the kids eat protein, they do better on their tests. So wouldn't it then kind of carry over? Like, wouldn't they do better on all of their schoolwork every day if they had fat and protein? The answer is yes. But I mean, I was guilty of that as a kid. You know, we would eat Cocoa Krispies and Cookie Crisp and Rice Krispie, but then you just add sugar onto it, right? And that's because that's what everybody did. You know, like it's not my mom's fault. It's like that's what you ate when you had kid breakfast, right? So I always did better though if I had bacon and eggs because it fed me, made me happier. So if you want the people around you to be better behaved, feed them more protein and fat, okay? They're easier to get along with. Everybody is. Okay, does this make sense? Yes. So the foods that are most dense in nutrients, that have the most nutrition, are going to be these foods. And of course vegetables and fruit, like real food, right? The less processed foods. Because almost all processed food, even if it's in the health foods section, or even if it's at Trader Joe's, which maybe be the worst of all health food stores ever when it comes to sugar, doesn't mean just because it's in that store or in that it says natural on the label, it doesn't mean that it's going to be good. You still have to look at the sugar content, and you still have to look at, you know, what's actually in it, because it's tricky. So they'll label its marketing because they want to sell you their product. So it'll say natural, it'll say healthy, it'll say heart healthy, it'll say all these words, but they don't have to back it up with anything. So you have to be diligent and start to really read the labels and see where the sugar's hiding. So an easy switch is, you know, try to reduce, if you're putting sugar in your tea or your coffee, just try to put in a little bit less every day until you get a point where you can drink it plain or black. You know, if you're having sugary beverages, fruit juice for kids, try to start to dilute it. So you're just having less concentrated drinks. You know, if somebody's trying to get off pop, usually recommend, okay, fill the glass with ice. Then enough, you know, only the pop goes only in between the ice cubes, and then you start to kind of go down from there, smaller glasses. So it's okay to wean, it's okay to do it slowly. And if you're already kind of on top of the sugar wagon and you're doing okay there, but you're still having a decent amount of carbohydrates, pastas, breads, that kind of starchy stuff, then that's the next thing to work on. So when it comes to things you can add into your diet, supplement in, that are easy and that will actually help with your health. So one of the things that we like to talk about is magnesium. I mentioned it already. So we actually have topical magnesium, because some people can't take magnesium. Sometimes it will actually cause their bowels to be too loose. It's a side effect of magnesium. For some people that's a good thing. That's okay. But for some of us that's not ideal. So topical magnesium is something that we use. So it gets absorbed right through the skin. So it helps with sore muscles and leg cramps. It improves sleep quality if you use it at night. But it's actually a form and a source of magnesium. It's very safe and very effective. It can go right through the skin. Lavender essential oil. There's others too, but lavender is sort of the most economical and certainly effective for a lot of people. Lavender is very calming to the nervous system. So you can put it on your feet at night to get more restful sleep. If you have a kid who's having trouble going to sleep or calming down, putting some lavender in a little diffuser in their room or putting a couple of drops on their feet, very, very helpful for calming the nervous system. If you have anxiety during the day, you can use lavender during the day. There's lots and lots of essential oils, but that's just like, that's the one. If you're gonna have one essential oil in your cupboard, lavender's it. Because it also works for bug bites and burns, and you know, like it's got lots of applications. So lavender oil's good. If you're having trouble focusing, if you want to get really crazy and have 2 essential oils, if you have trouble focusing or you're having a headache, brain fog, peppermint. So you can, you know, eat peppermint tea, or you can have you know, peppermints, as long as they're not sugar peppermints, right? But peppermint oil is if you're breathing it in or rubbing it on your temples, that can be very, very good for focus, for clarity, for helping you concentrate better. And there's virtually no side effects to these types of things, you know. It's occasionally someone will say, I don't love lavender, it kind of makes me feel like an upset stomach, but it's pretty rare. My dog hates it, so that's the only side effect I have. She's like, I don't get to hang out with my dog. She runs away. I pull out the lavender, she's like, I'm out of here, but that's okay. That's because she likes to be crazy and she doesn't want to calm down, so that's all that is. So these are some keys. So drinking enough water will help with the sugar cravings and help keep things more balanced as well. So a lot of times if you're feeling tired or fatigued, having more water will help. And always with the water, we recommend making sure you're having enough salt. So sea salt, either the pink kind or the gray kind, the Celtic sea salt, that has lots of minerals in it. So we talked about how minerals get depleted from sugar and stress. So a good way to get a nice array of minerals is to make sure you're taking in good quality sea salt. So if you're drinking water, if you're drinking more water than you used to, like increasing your water, you should be increasing your salt as well. If you're drinking a bunch of water and all you're doing is peeing all the time, you don't have enough salt. So just, if you gradually increase your water and your bladder or your kidneys start freaking out and all you can do is be in the bathroom, or if your urine is super clear, it shouldn't be clear, it should be light yellow. If it's really, really clear, you're not absorbing that water. You're just flushing it right through and you're flushing minerals out with it. So that's where you want to add in more salt. So you can salt your food, or you can even put a pinch of salt in the glasses of water you're drinking, like an electrolyte mix. So Gatorade is loaded with sugar and or chemicals, but just putting salt in your water is a great way to hydrate. It's good for athletes, and it is good for focus. So have you ever experienced afternoon, you start to lose focus and then you drink a big glass of water and you're like, I'm back. No, just me? Okay. Well, it's a thing. Just saying. All right. And you don't have to worry, if you're using good quality salt, good quality sea salt, you don't have to worry about your blood pressure. It's very, very rare for someone's blood pressure to react negatively to this if you're drinking enough water, eating salt, and working on other dietary aspects. Okay. So again, good source of minerals.
How do you know if it's good quality salt?
Yeah, so good quality salt should not be bright white. So
it's just the Himalayan or the Celtic
Himalayan or the
fine.
Celtic. They come in other fancy things too, like you can get black salts and things like that. Those are more like culinary salts. But yeah, the pink or the gray are the best option. If it's bright white, that means it's been usually bleached in some way or processed in some way. So you want it to be a little colorful because that's what the minerals are lending, is the color. And there's a lot of good quality salts out there. It's certainly more available than it used to be. But yeah, there's some sort of the bigger salt companies and they market sea salt, but when you look at it, it looks very similar to regular salt. It's very white, so it means that they've processed it in some way, cleaned it, if you will. So not most ideal. Good? You guys doing okay? All right. So magnesium's for calming and your brain, lavender's for calming, peppermint's stimulating, water and salt just help with focus, and quite frankly just overall health because you're supplying good minerals and keeping your brain happy and your organs functioning. Exercise, I'll throw this in because I'll tell you what, the studies have been done. So you don't hear about it on the news. It's not very profitable. But they've done studies where they took 3 groups of people. First group of people get antidepressants only. Next group of people get antidepressants and a prescription for exercise, walking. And the third group get a prescription for exercise. Guess who does best long term with depression? Exercise only. So that tells us 2 things. It tells us that antidepressants alone are not as good as exercise, but it also tells us that even if you're exercising, once you add in the antidepressants, it actually makes it less effective. So over time, this is a longer term study. Over time, those medications will actually deplete and create some of the symptoms that you're trying to handle. So we know this to be true, that the action of antidepressant, anti-anxiety medications is over time, you become sort of, I don't want to say immune to them, but they stop working. So usually you have to change what you're taking or increase the dose, or they kind of switch you back and forth. But the truth is that it's not because they're not working, it's because your brain has changed to try to accommodate the drug. It's affecting the chemistry of the brain. So instead of changing the chemistry of the brain in an artificial way, ideally what you're trying to do is actually change it for the better, make it work better for you. So talk about exercise, we talk about things like relaxation, meditation, right? Things where you're actually sort of like not thinking all the time in this fast-paced world that we talked about. So those are all valid ways to actually reduce depression, reduce anxiety, help with sleep. But exercise is the easiest. We can all do it. Walking is considered perfectly fine. Preferably outside. I know that's hard in February, but this time of year, getting outside for a 20-minute walk is key to mental health and sanity. And it's kind of enjoyable too, right? And good for your body. I will say a word. I said I would say something about electronics and computers. So the way that the blue light in cell phones and computers affects our brain, in addition to the way that the electromagnetic fields are affecting us, it's very negative. It has a very negative effect on our ability to focus, on our mood. And so it's something to consider, especially if you're having trouble sleeping. It's something to consider. You might want to stop using your devices, and that would include television, ideally, by 8 p.m. So I know that's prime time. Sorry. Nobody asked me. I would have told them 7. Do prime time at 7. We can be done by 8. But prime time, I know it starts at 8, but that's the time where you should be turning off those artificial lights, getting away from the screens. So if you're going to read a book, read an actual book, not on your reader, because those lights are telling your brain it's daytime, and they're very stimulating. It's worse than just being in an actual light. It's worse than being outside. It's the blue light is actually stimulating the part of your brain that's telling you wake up, wake up, wake up. So if you do that and then you try to sleep, forget it. It won't be as restful. Even if you feel like you're sleeping, it won't be as restful. So the solution to that is try not to be exposed to those lights after 8 p.m. And then they make these little glasses that you can wear. They're yellow lenses. Right? You get them on Amazon for $7 or whatever. They look like construction worker glasses, kind of. They make fancy ones if you want to spend more money, but whatever. So at 8 o'clock, you pop on their blue blocker glasses, is what they are. So it's blocking out the blue light. So even if you're in an environment that's light, at least that blue light is not getting into your brain and telling you, wake up, wake up, wake up. Because what you want is you want your body to start producing melatonin and some of the other chemicals that are going to help you sleep. So that's the real solution. So some people take melatonin to try to sleep. The real solution is, well, let's get your body to produce it, because it's what it normally does. That's an actual chemical that we're supposed to be producing. So just a little word on the devices. So when your kids are like a mess in the morning and they, are like, didn't sleep, I was, up all night. And a lot of times they're up all night on purpose because they're up till 2 o'clock on their device. It's like the worst possible thing from a mood, focus, attention standpoint, because it's going to be really affecting not only their quality of sleep, but how their brain actually works. So it's stimulating. So caffeine's a stimulant, sugar's a stimulant, blue light is a stimulant. So you can see why we have more and more people with anxiety and insomnia, today than ever before, because we have all those things coming at us at once. So just something to think about. Okay? Is this helpful? Yes? Okay. Any questions? Yes?
Can I just ask about how there used to be iodine and salt, and there isn't anymore, and what's that about?
So they add iodine to table salt. So it's iodized salt, right? So I'm not exactly sure 100% how it came about, except for that people were getting goiters in certain parts of the country because there's no iodine in the soil. So they were adding the iodine to the salt with the intention of preventing goiters, which it will do. It's just enough iodine to prevent a goiter. Goiter is when your thyroid swells, because you need iodine for your thyroid. So sea salt does not contain iodine, but it never did. It wasn't that it was taken out, but so in order to get enough iodine, shellfish. Seaweed is actually one of the best sources. Kelp or seaweed is a really good source of iodine. I cheat and I use the Celtic salt that has the seaweed added. So that has the iodine. So it's salt with iodine, basically. So that's kind of how I get around the not having iodine.
Does all of the Celtic salt have iodine, so you have to look
No.
for the one that
Yeah, so
says it?
I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you. We have it. There is one that actually they add seaweed to it.
Okay.
So it's just Celtic salt with seaweed. So.
Does it taste like seaweed?
I would say it has a tiny bit of a fishy flavor, but only if you were using it. Like if you were gonna just sprinkle it on a cucumber, you could probably tell. But if you're using it in cooking, you won't notice. No, it tastes the same. And seaweed's good. You know, if you hate fish, you won't like it. But seaweed, like little seaweed snacks and things like that, that's a great source of iodine. Shrimp, like I said, shellfish, good source of iodine, so you could add that in if you're not allergic. Yeah, it used to be there was iodine in the soil, and so it was in our food, and that's, you know, but it just, there's certain parts of the country where, well, probably now most of the country, but at the time that they added the iodine to the salt, it was just certain parts. Good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else good? All right, so I'm gonna be here if you have questions. We'll say goodbye to Facebook, bye Facebook. If you have any questions,